They look almost human until rage flips a switch. This video asks the question behind the headlines. Why can a chimpanzee bite off fingers and tear faces in fury? We follow the thread of a chilling truth. The chimpanzee, pan-troglodytes, is a strong ape capable of brutal violence. Tonight, we pry open how and why they become instruments of terror. This isn't myth or sensationalism. It's biology, social pressure, and a nervous system tuned for explosive force. We'll trace the anatomy and the triggers that turn curiosity into carnage. Imagine a creature with hands like ours and a mouth built for destruction. A primate whose teeth and jaws can dismember flesh. That contradiction is the center of our investigation. We will answer the central question: what makes a chimpanzee capable of biting off fingers and ripping faces? And how much of that is instinct, physiology, or social contagion? This is a program about extremes. Primal force wrapped in a recognizably human face. A creature whose violence shocks because it reflects us, and yet is ruthlessly other. We'll move from skull to society. Jaw mechanics, muscles, brain circuits, group dynamics, and the violent outbreaks that leave victims maimed. Stay with me, it only gets darker. This exploration is clinical and visceral. Expect facts about bite force, skin tearing, and the social triggers that can spark a feeding frenzy of aggression among chimpanzees. We will also confront the moral shadow, humans creating conditions for conflict, keeping wild apes in captivity, and misreading behaviors born of complex evolutionary pressures. First, the body. To understand the horror, we must know what makes these apes capable of tearing flesh. Anatomy holds the answer. Bone, muscle, and a mouth engineered for violence. Start with the skull. Pan-troglodytes has massive jaw muscles anchored to a robust zygomatic arch. Those muscles generate a bite force far beyond ours, optimized to crush and tear. The canine teeth are long and pointed, used for display and combat. When aggression escalates, those canines become tools for slashing skin, puncturing arteries, and inflicting permanent damage. Their dental arcade and strong masseter muscles allow sustained, crushing bites. A chimpanzee's jaws can apply hundreds of pounds of pressure, enough to sever a finger or tear flesh cleanly. Hands are a paradox. Dexterous, human-like, capable of gentle grooming or brutal dismemberment. Those same hands clutch, pry, and twist, amplifying damage after a bite has broken skin. Muscle composition matters. Chimpanzees pack more fast-twitch fibers in upper body muscles than humans, enabling explosive strength during grappling and sudden, lethal lunges. Their shoulders and arms are built for power. With a locked elbow and contracted pectorals, a chimp can pull or throw a victim with terrifying force, turning a bite into a ritualized mauling. Skin and tissue differ from ours. Thick epidermis and tough fascia resist tearing in some places, but face and fingertips remain vulnerable, thin, richly innervated, and easy targets. Sensory wiring matters. Chimpanzees have keen tactile sensitivity in fingers and faces, so attacks aimed at those areas are both destructive and symbolically devastating among their peers. Now, the brain. The limbic system, ancient emotion centers, can hijack decision-making. In moments of rage, lower circuits override frontal control, producing impulsive, violent outcomes. Chimpanzees have large amygdalae and rapidly mobilize stress hormones. Adrenal surges sharpen strength and blunt pain, allowing a single individual to inflict disproportionate damage in seconds. Mirror neurons and social cognition give them a human-like awareness. They know humiliation and dominance. That awareness can turn violence into a ritual, targeted, deliberate, and terrifyingly effective. Their vocal apparatus produces alarming screams and hoots that escalate conflict. Sound acts as a contagion, priming others to join or to retaliate, turning a moment into mob violence. Bones matter too. Dense mandibles and robust facial bones distribute impact forces, allowing bites without catastrophic skull damage to the aggressor. That structural strength supports extreme behaviors. Hormones shape temperament. Testosterone peaks in males correlate with aggression spikes. Cortisol and adrenaline fuel the frenzy. Biology primes them. Context decides whether that energy morphs into violence. Injuries bred for survival. Their immune responses heal fast, but infections still devastate victims. A lost finger can mean lifelong disability or death in the wild or captivity. Neurological control is paradoxical. Their executive cortex exists, yet strong emotional circuits can short-circuit restraint. Intentional cruelty and reflexive rage overlap in ways that make attacks unpredictable. Their visual system reads faces quickly. Threat, submission, anger. Facial expressions trigger responses. A wrong look can escalate a spat into a mauling with uncanny speed. Grip strength is staggering. Chimp hands can crush bone and snap cartilage. That power helps them manipulate tools, but in fights it becomes an instrument of tearing and removal. Their digestive system tolerates meat. Chimpanzees will hunt and consume flesh. That predatory trait normalizes killing, blurring lines between territorial violence and feeding aggression. When you hear of a face being torn, remember, it's the product of anatomy, social coding, and a brain wired for intense social emotions that can erupt into brutality. Troglodytes evolved in forests where force secured allies and resources. Evolution favored those who could intimidate, dominate, and occasionally kill rivals with savage efficiency. But anatomy is only part of the story. The next layer is behavior. How these bodies are used when fear and rage take hold. That's where humans often misread the signals. Transitioning from structure to action. We now watch the choreography of violence. How does a ritualized threat become a frenzied assault that removes fingers and shreds faces? Chimpanzees practice dominance through displays, branch shaking, charging, screaming. Displays lower the risk of contact, but when they fail, escalation is swift and physical violence ensues. Hunting parties reveal coordination. Groups ambush monkeys, tearing flesh with coordinated bites. Those same cooperative tactics can be repurposed into group-targeted aggression against individuals. Infanticide is a grim reality in some communities. Attacks on infants and mothers are methodical, showing that chimp violence can be planned, purposeful, and biologically motivated. Rage can be contagious. A single violent act triggers screams and pursuit. Allies flood in, and what began as a bite becomes a communal mauling, with victims dismembered and faces torn. Territorial raids are surgical. Chimpanzees patrol borders, isolate lone individuals, and attack with intent to maim or kill. Fingers and faces become collateral in a strategy to eliminate rivals. Violence often targets specific areas. Hands and faces convey status. Tearing a face is not random cruelty. It can erase identity and social standing within the group. Tool use amplifies injury. A chimp can bite and hold, while another uses a stick to pry or break, increasing damage. Cooperation in violence is as sophisticated as cooperation in hunting. Predatory instincts matter. When chimpanzees hunt monkeys, they tear flesh to feed. That normalized eating of meat lowers inhibition against using teeth as weapons in social conflict. Play can turn dark. Rough play teaches young chimps how to bite and restrain. Those lessons escalate into lethal skills when context shifts from play to genuine aggression. Retaliation is swift and cruel. If an individual is attacked, allies may extract revenge later, employing ambushes designed to inflict symbolic and permanent damage. Sexual competition drives extreme acts. Males may attack rivals or displace mates aggressively. In these confrontations, the face becomes a target to humiliate and incapacitate. Fury slows cognition. Adrenalized chimps experience tunnel vision and motor priming, focusing on immediate dominance rather than long-term cost. The result? Rapid brutality with little inhibition. Victims are often isolated first. Group tactics include cutting escape routes, surrounding, and pinning. Only then do teeth and hands do the irreversible work of tearing and removing. Some attacks serve practical functions. Removing fingers denies tool use and social standing. These are punitive and strategic, not merely rage-driven carnage. Observe bruising patterns. Bites concentrated on hands, forearms, and face reveal intent. Forensic analysis shows repetitive targeting, indicating learned techniques rather than random violence. Captivity distorts behavior. Stress, overcrowding, and lack of outlet increase aggression. Chimps in human care sometimes exhibit more frequent, intensified attacks than their wild counterparts. Human proximity triggers conflict. Competition for food, mating, and status around provisioning points can ignite fights that escalate into severe maulings and permanent mutilations. Learning plays a role. Juveniles observe adult violence and internalize methods. That cultural transmission spreads brutal techniques across generations, hardening patterns of face and finger targeting. Stress hormones paint the behavior scene. Elevated cortisol correlates with aggression frequency. Repeated stress exposure lowers thresholds for explosive attacks that culminate in tearing flesh. Dominant males enforce order with violence. A single display can become punitive. If a subordinate resists, the dominant may bite or mutilate to reassert control, leaving victims maimed. Females are not mere bystanders. They form coalitions, intervene, and can instigate aggression to protect offspring or alliances. Violence among chimps is a social instrument wielded by both sexes. Ritualized group violence can resemble human mobbing. Once momentum builds, restraint fades. Bites become more savage, faces torn, as the collective psychology tips into frenzy. Seasonal pressures matter. Scarcity can increase raids and aggression. During lean periods, competition becomes deadly, and violent displays evolve into permanent mutilation or death. Tool-augmented violence appears in rare reports. Rocks and sticks used to immobilize before biting. These improvised weapons intensify injuries and enable sustained maulings. Some attacks are opportunistic. A lone human too close to young chimps becomes a target. Human hands, especially, are vulnerable to chomping and removal during panic-driven encounters. We must separate predation from punishment. Hunting behaviors show intent to eat. Social maulings aim to disable or humble. Both, however, produce the grotesque outcomes that make headlines. From individual acts to group systems, social structure determines how violence erupts and spreads. Now we examine coalitions, hierarchies, and the corrosive power of social stress. Chimp societies are complex. Rank and alliances dictate access to mates and food. When status is threatened, violence becomes a political tool, merciless, efficient, and symbolic. Coalitions use coordinated violence to remove rivals. These are not random brawls, but strategic eliminations. Victims are isolated, punished, sometimes mutilated to prevent future challenges. Subgroups fragment communities. Intergroup conflict can be savage. Raids that resemble warfare, where attackers seek to kill or permanently maim members of neighboring groups. Mobbing of outsiders is common. Stragglers entering a territory risk being torn apart. That behavior preserves group cohesion by ruthlessly eliminating perceived threats. Tensions escalate quickly. A fight over food can cascade into an identity-shredding attack because chimps weaponize faces and hands to erase social memory and dominance cues. Sometimes violence consolidates power. A dominant male may orchestrate an attack to deter rivals, sending a message with maiming as its punctuation. Alliances are fragile. Former allies can become predators. Betrayal triggers revenge assaults that often focus on the face, a profoundly social target that communicates humiliation. Group memory matters. A well-known aggressor can instill fear across generations. Young chimps learn who to avoid or to follow, perpetuating violent reputations and practices. Human interactions can disrupt these systems. Provisioning or habitat loss forces unnatural congregations, increasing conflict and the risk of face-tearing outbreaks among stressed groups. Pregnant females and infants become flashpoints. Aggression toward them can fracture social bonds and provoke coalitionary responses, sometimes culminating in public, brutal attacks. Dominance disputes often leave visible markers, missing digits, scars, and flattened faces. These injuries serve as social records, trophies of past conflicts and warnings to others. Feeding competition sharpens aggression. When fruits or meat are scarce, chimps resort to violent enforcement, sometimes removing hands that would otherwise steal resources. Males use violence to control female reproductive access. These conflicts can spiral beyond mating rights into lethal harassment, infanticide, or maiming intended to eliminate competition. Coalitional aggression reshapes population dynamics. Successful raids expand territory and resource control, but also increase the prevalence of severe injuries among both attackers and victims. Violence threads into life history. Next, we examine reproduction and the cycle of life, where sacrifice, competition, and sometimes horrific outcomes define survival and legacy. Reproduction in chimpanzees is high stakes. Males compete fiercely for mates, and those competitions often escalate to violence that leaves lasting scars or removes rivals permanently. Infanticide is sometimes a reproductive strategy. New dominant males may kill offspring sired by others to bring females back into estrus, a brutal calculus of evolutionary advantage. Motherhood is dangerous. Females protect infants with ferocity. But when coalitions form, mothers can be overwhelmed. The social costs of reproduction are life or death for young chimps. Juvenile development involves rough play and practice fights. These training sessions teach motor skills for climbing, hunting, and combat, essential, but also rehearsal for real violence. Maturation shapes social strategies. Subadult males form coalitions to challenge higher-ranked individuals, a process that often ends with bloody confrontations and permanent mutilations. Lifespan is variable. Wild chimps may live 3 to 4 decades. Captive individuals can live longer. Yet survival depends on navigating social dangers where one fight can be fatal. Reproductive success links to violence. Winners of fights gain mates and territory. Evolution rewards those who wield force effectively. A sobering reminder of natural selection's ruthless logic. The costs are visible in bodies: healed scars, missing fingers, flattened noses. These tell stories of past conflicts and harsh life histories written on flesh. Maternal abandonment can occur if a mother is killed or driven off. Orphaned juveniles may be adopted, but often succumb to predation or social exclusion, a cruel reality of chimp life. Reproduction and violence are braided. The very behaviors that secure genes also create victims, making survival a narrative written through aggression and sacrifice. Ecologically, chimpanzees are both predators and seed dispersers. Their hunting shapes prey populations, while their foraging affects forest composition and long-term ecosystem structure. When chimps remove individuals from neighboring groups, they alter population genetics and territory boundaries. Their violence can determine which communities thrive and which fade. Their predation on monkeys and small mammals controls those populations, cascading through food webs. Violence, in ecological terms, is a force that balances species interactions. If chimpanzees disappear, forests would change. Seed dispersal patterns would shift, prey populations would surge, and ecological networks would unravel. Violence is part of a larger balance. Conversely, human disturbance can increase aggression. Habitat loss condenses populations, forcing unnatural interactions and raising the incidence of maiming and lethal conflicts. The presence of chimps can deter some human activities and shape local predator dynamics. Their brutality has ripple effects that extend beyond immediate victims. Conservation must account for behavior. Protecting chimps involves preserving social systems intact. Fragmented or stressed groups often become more violent and less resilient. Understanding their role helps us weigh ethical decisions. Removing chimps from the wild to protect humans, or leaving them in shrinking habitats that fuel aggression. No option is simple. Human-induced changes can amplify the very behaviors we fear. Road building, poaching, and enclosure create conditions where maulings and mutilations become more frequent. We've seen anatomy, behavior, and ecology. Now we must ask, what do these brutal realities mean for our relationship with a creature so close to us and yet so capable of horror? The chimpanzee's violence challenges our self-image. We are not the sole authors of cruelty. Evolution scripts it elsewhere. That realization is unsettling and morally urgent. Captivity raises hard questions. Zoos and sanctuaries rescue individuals, but can intensify aggression through stress. Human safety, animal welfare, and conservation form a tangled ethical knot. We must reconcile fascination and fear. Learning why chimpanzees can bite off fingers and tear faces forces us to confront how close kinship and brutal instincts coexist in nature. The almost human ape teaches a harsh lesson: empathy without naivete. Respect their power, protect habitats, and rethink how our actions provoke the very violence we dread. You came for horror and left with understanding. Troglodytes is strong, messy, and terrifying, but also ecologically vital. Our response will decide if this story ends in survival or tragedy.